And now on Radio 4, another case for Detective Nobby Lovell. The case of the defective driver. Top of the morning to you, Detective.
Morning, young tippler. Nice to see you back at the Horse and Whippet. You back from university to earn a few bob then?
I got back from uni last week and managed to snag 3 days a week here, behind the bar, and half a day on Monday at the golf club, helping out Tommy Sycamore, mowing the grass and wetting the tee. The usual then, Detective.
That's right, young tippler. A pint of applejack. It was then that I felt a tap on my shoulder. Actually, it was more like a grab. I spun round quick smart, only to see the smiling face of Jeremy Khan, a lovely Indian fella who moved in the village quite recently from South Wales with his family to run a fanciful restaurant called the Bombay Bong. "Hello there, Jeremy. How's trade?" I said.
Very, very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Nobby. Sit down is so-so, but takeout has taken off like a Tendulkar cover drive. Our chicken macaroni is quite the hit. It's bowling over the whole village. But, Mr. Nobby, I have a problem, and I wonder if you could draw upon your expertise in solving a little mystery.
A mystery needing solving is my peaches and cream. I would have to put the case of the curbside crapper on pause. Young tippler, hold that applejack. I pulled out my notebook and I licked my pencil. It tasted of lead. I wrote down Jeremy and then stopped. Do you spell Khan with a K as in kettle or as a C as in can?
No, K as in Kit Kat.
Now, what seems to be the problem then, Jeremy?
Well, the other week, I noticed my driver was defective. It has started making whirling noises. I've had it for years and was time for a replacement. So I went straight to Amazon and bought a Mac.
I scribbled down driver, noises, Amazon and Mac.
The tracking number says it should have been in my hands 6 days ago. I spoke to the postmaster, who said they couldn't remember seeing anything in my name. Either it was lost in the post, in which case I will have to go back to Amazon, or most probably it has been stolen. As you know, Mr. Nobby, Macs these days are very expensive and very tempting for anyone with itchy fingers.
Well, I must admit I was a bit puzzled by what I was hearing. Firstly, I'd never seen Mr. Khan at the golf club, and I'd never heard of a driver becoming defective after only 4 years of use, unless, of course, he'd bent the shaft in a fit of golf rage, although that wouldn't account for the whirling noise. Secondly, if he broke his driver, why would he want to possibly replace it with a Mac? It might keep the rain off him, but then he'd be stuck with just a 3-wood. Thirdly, why travel all the way to South America to buy the bloody raincoat? I was in Devizes town centre t'other day, and Primark were selling perfectly good Macs for $2.99. The airfare to South America alone would have cost Mr. Khan hundreds of pounds. A 40p bus fare and $2.99 would have snagged him a perfectly good Mac. These musings were spinning round my head like a pendulum. It was like playing Scrabble with a rack full of cues. You said you spoke to the postmaster, Jeremy. Did he try and track down your package?
It wasn't a he, it was a she, Mr. Nobby. She went by the name of Mary.
At the name of Mary, my face puckered like I was sucking on a sour lemon dipped in vinegar. Mary, or rather Mad Mary as she was called in the neighbourhood, was my sister. I hadn't spoken to her for over 20 years. So, Jeremy, what did she say?
She told me she couldn't remember seeing a package under my name, but she said the other postie may have delivered it on a day off.
Well, that is where I shall have to start my inquiries, I said reluctantly, and bade farewell to Mr. Khan and young Tippler. Being a detective is a 24/7 job, even on your off days. As much as I knew I could do more productive things and solve the mystery of Mr. Khan's missing driver, like digging up allotment and planting a new batch of spuds, I knew it simply had to be done. And unfortunately, a trip to my sister Mad Mary's cottage was another thing that had to be done. After 20 years, it was time I broke my silence. Now, not talking to someone for 2 decades needs some explaining. My sister made some bad choices in her life. It started early when she chose a toffee penny from the Christmas Quality Street tin and lost her 2 front teeth. Then there was the time she went to Alfie Prattle's tattoo parlour in Devizes to celebrate her new job with the postal service. Everybody but her knew Alfie was dyslexic, and she came away with a tattoo saying Sweet Pea on her thigh. Trouble was, Alfie had spelt P with 2 E's. Her worst choice, though, was tying the knot to Frankie the Stapler McGuinness. The knot she tied might as well have been a noose. McGuinness began smuggling French cigarettes through the Royal Mail, and those parcels went through Mary's hands like wet bars of soap. Suspicion arose when McGuinness left a parcel too close to the fireplace at the Rose and Crown, and it caught light. The fire brigade were called, and then the police. It wasn't difficult to put 2 and 2 together, but I decided to protect my sister and told my superiors that it didn't add up to anything at all. A decision I would always regret. There are only 2 sides to the law, and that line should never be crossed, not even for family. I decided to send her to Coventry, and so started the silent treatment. Well, time to finally break that silence. I parked my scooter next to a trim hedge adjacent to Mad Mary's cottage and tucked my helmet under my arm. The crunching of gravel on the path leading to the front door drowned out the sound of my gnashing teeth. My right hand arched its way to the brass fox door knocker. The door opened. She stood on the top step and glowered down at me. She was dressed in her postie's uniform with porridge stains down the front of her tunic. There was a large rip in her shorts, making P visible on her leg. There was no sign of the sweet. On her feet were a pair of pink Crocs, which were now stamping on the step. Before I could break the silence, she broke wind.
Why, look what the cat's brought in. Run out of Applejack, have he? What do you want with me after all these years?
Her mouth was a tight grimace under a mop of white hair, and her forehead was furrowed like one of Farmer Ebditch's fields. Her specs were held together with sellotape, and her grey eyes oozed hate. My personal instincts had to be put on hold. I gritted my teeth and adopted my best professional approach to a witness. In my capacity as a detective sergeant, I have to ask you some questions about a case which I'm currently investigating. You'd best cooperate with my informal interview, or I shall soon send for a squad car, and we can have a formal interview at the station. It is up to you.
Well, now, this must be serious. Has Bill Pittard lost a cat?
Me eyes widened and me jaw tightened, but I ignored the sarcasm and endeavoured to keep me cool. Mr. Khan, the owner of the Bombay Bung, has reported an important parcel missing, which he had tracked to the local post office. But when he questioned you about it, you professed no knowledge of its arrival.
Well, now, Mr. Can did give me a song and dance about a parcel which certainly had not arrived on my shift. But I'm not as useless as you may think. I checked the next day with my oppo, Dave Goddard, who had been on the next shift, and he did tell me that a parcel for Mr. Khan had got stuck in the bottom of one of the big parcel bags. On the way back to deliver it to the Bombay Bong, he bumped into Gracie Moore. Now, Mr. Goddard's legs are not as strong as mine, and so he had Gracie sign for the parcel on the promise that she'd hand it over to Mr. Khan.
Gracie Moore, I said, mulling the name over in my head.
You know Gracie. She goes out with that young student, Tippler. Nice girl, but why Tippler fancies her I don't know. Pretty, but flighty with a head full of teenage nonsense, and a thumb always pecking away at her mobile phone.
Thank you, Mary. That gives me a new line of inquiry. By the way, have you seen anything of the lovely Frankie lately? Her eyes narrowed like a sniper ready to shoot.
That turnip! I risked my job for him, and could have been banged up behind bars because of him. But what does he do? Runs off with some French floozy, leaving me with a hefty phone bill, an empty fridge and a box set of Clancy Brothers records. How he got away scot-free after smuggling all those French ciggies, I'll never know. When he left all those years ago, it was good riddance to bad rubbish. Mind you, to the Thursday at Devizes Market, I thought I caught a glimpse of him in the shambles. But this shadowy figure disappeared, and I was never sure if it were him. Now, that's all I have to say, so bugger off.
With that, she slammed the door in my face. There's gratitude for you. I put the case to bed to protect her, put my job on the line, and that's the treatment I get. I don't mind if I never speak to her for another 20 years. However, I did have a new lead to follow up. I had to speak to young Gracie Moore to confirm the package had been received. So off I scooted to the Bombay Bung. I looked forward to seeing Mr. Khan wearing his new Mac. I also looked forward to a pint of Applejack. This case was about to be solved, or so I thought. As I approached the Bombay Bung, I saw something that turned the case on its head. Young Tippler was there in conversation with Gracie Moore, and if my scooter's brakes had been in good working order, I would have stopped dead in my tracks. For next to her was stood someone who I had no trouble recognising. It was Frankie Stapler McGuinness. And at that very moment, a grinning Jeremy Khan came out of the Bombay Bung, with a brown paper takeaway bag in his hand, and he was not wearing his new Mac. The Amazon, the Bombay Bong, a smuggler. Fireworks began exploding in my brain. I had stumbled on some kind of drugs ring. Now, I wasn't sure if Stapler and young Tippler were on the supplying or receiving end of the chain, but I did know that wherever that brown paper bag went, I had to follow. As Tippler headed off with the bag in his hand and Stapler in tow, I thought back to the half-day surveillance course I'd attended in Taunton with the Somerset Constabulary way back in 1979. I had topped up this surveillance knowledge with a rather clever scene from a Jason Bourne video I'd rented. I pulled me scooter over to the side of the road, turned me jacket inside out, and proceeded to follow Tippler and Stapler. You couldn't have got more plain clothes than the clothes I was wearing from Primark, but this took me outfit to an even lower level. Out of the corner of me eye, never understood how an oval shape could actually have a corner. I saw that the two suspects were proceeding along Puckenden Avenue. I turned my scooter round and accelerated full scoot up the high street, and bugger me, me notebook, me pencil and me Parker pen that were in my inside jacket pocket flew into the air and cascaded over the road behind me. Turning one's jacket inside out as a surveillance technique has its downsides. I pulled my scooter over to the roadside once again, this time to retrieve the said items. I was quick to recover the Parker pen, and its arrow pointed me to the notepad. Me pencil, though, had rolled under Mick Maloney's parked Land Rover and sat in an oily puddle. I recovered it and wiped it on my handkerchief, which turned the white cotton blacky brown. My hanky now looked the same colour as this white-haired fella's in the next village, who was forever standing on the side of the road waving his hanky at passing cars. Strange fella. All this took time that I did not have. I turned my jacket outside in and speeded up the high street, then turned quickly onto Church Street where, bugger me, I nearly ran over Tippler and Stapler as they were crossing the road. I skidded past them and quickly turned up Cots Hill, where I stops me scooter. The element of surprise had gone now, so I thought back to that surveillance course once again. I needed to abandon my scooter and follow them on foot, but this time in disguise. Now, there's more to a good disguise than a pair of cheap sunglasses and a fake moustache. So, after putting on my sunnies and wiping me top lip with me dirty hanky, I turned my jacket inside out again, this time securing me notepad, Parker pen and pencil in me trouser pocket. I then limped down Cots Hill towards Church Street. Now, a good limp is not only useful to get cars to stop for you when you want to cross the road, a good limp gives you a new identity. People will all walk in their own special way, so much so that it is possible to recognise someone you know from a distance in excess of 100 metres away. A limp acts as your camouflage and can make you unrecognisable. I turned onto Church Street.
Morning, Defective. Sorry, Detective. Sunny day, ain't it? Hurt your leg?
It was Pearl Pittard. She was out walking her cat. I nodded and limped on. High village crime levels are often misunderstood, and around here it was an epidemic. There was I, trying to focus my attention on Tippler and Stapler, when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the heels of a size 5 pair of pumps disappear over Mrs. Pittard's wall. Craning my neck over the wall, I noticed they were the heels of young Billy Alderdine, a tearaway if there ever was one, and the only 9-year-old in the village never to have shed a tear. Although there are stories that an equally young Mickey Bird roughed him up and caused some tears after he caught Billy writing some particularly nasty graffiti about Mickey Bird's younger brother Gary. I should know I solved the case. Boo to Gary Bird. The language some kids use these days. Anyways, I pulled myself up and pivoted on the wall and told Billy Alderdine he had 10 seconds to get out of Pearl Pittard's property before I came down on him like a ton of bricks.
Boo to you, copper!
Shouted Billy Alderdine, scarpering away. Well, I never. The potty-mouthed language of kids today, I thought. I was soon on to Tippler and Stapler. Thankfully, Tippler was still holding on to the brown paper bag. I saw all this in the reflection of Tubby Smith's fish and chip shop window. This was another trick I'd seen Jason Bourne do, using shop windows as mirrors. However, I was distracted by the smell of frying chips, which made me realise I hadn't had my lunch yet. My eyes focused on the menu on the shelf on t'other side of the window. The Godfather, $2.99. Flying Scotch egg, 60 pence. The prawn broker, £3. Good fry Mr. Chips, 90 pence. Burger she wrote, £2.50. No place like home, £2. When did Tubby suddenly get all creative with his menu? I mused. Mind you, I could do better, I chuckled, if I had more time to mull it over. Stop, I thought to myself. I needed to start carping on and focus on the job in hand. I needed to net a couple of criminals. I used the window as a mirror once again, and bugger me, I'd lost them again. I limped around the town looking for them, so much so that the limp became real. They were harder to find than a sixpence in a Scotsman's Christmas pudding. I needed to rest and I needed me lunch, so I headed to the Horse and Whippet.
Good afternoon to you, Detective.
Well, blow me. It was young Tippler standing behind the bar with a look of innocence on his face. No doubt he was like a duck on water with his feet paddling nervously under the counter. I glanced around the pub. There was no sign of Stapler anywhere. I nodded at the vicar, who was sat in the corner polishing off a plate of chicken maharani. I asked Tippler for the menu.
I'm sorry, Detective. The kitchen's closed. The cooker's not working.
Clearly, young Tippler didn't want me about. He was hiding something and he was up to something. But now was not the time to confront him. Now was not the time to take on the criminal underworld. I headed to Tubby's fish and chip shop and ordered me the Godfather before recovering me scooter. Now, a detective's notebook is his oracle. Details is what solves cases, and details is what is missed if they are not committed to paper. That evening I did just that. I licked me pencil. It tasted of engine oil. And I scribbled everything down that I had learnt about the case so far. When I had finished, I had a much shorter pencil but a much clearer mind. The criminal underworld, led by young Tippler and Stapler, had chosen our village as the hub of their felonious operations. The two of them were supplying marijuana to Mr. Khan at the Bombay Bong, who was distributing it under the guise of a take-out food service. I'd be damned if I'd let my village be turned into another Amsterdam. But already the drugs had been having their effect. Tubby Smith getting all creative with his menu, Pearl Pittard walking her cat, and even the vicar going all Hindu on us. And now it seems Mr. Khan was looking to up his game. He had a contact in the Amazon, in Colombia no doubt, who had posted him a shipment of cocaine smuggled inside a raincoat. He didn't have a problem with drugs, I mused. He had a problem with a police officer, and that problem was about to get a whole lot more problematic. I was definitely onto something big. Bigger, I thought, than that curbside crapper case, and that put me in a bit of a quandary. Was this the time to send it up my chain of command? Well, I have to confess that the links in our chain are a bit rusty. My immediate superior is Detective Inspector Doug Peeler. He is a very laid-back officer, and his watchwords are, "Take it easy, lads," or "Easy does it." So he has now got the nickname Easy Peeler, which makes him sound like something off the fruit stall at Morrison's. He'd most likely put this case to the bottom of his in tray. Easy's boss was Detective Chief Inspector Frank Stigger, a real hard man and very keen on the use of the SWAT team. Last time I'd involved him in a case in the village, he'd used smoke grenades and tasers to catch a joker who had been stealing the vicar's Sunday Times. And the joker was not Batman's nemesis, it was a 10-year-old boy. I drummed my fingers against the table and gave it some thought. Now, most people know that doctors are bound by the hypnotic oath, but not many people know that we police officers are bound by the attestation oath. When I became a policeman, I promised the Queen that I'd uphold the law, and by God, I didn't want to let her down. I promised myself that after a good night's sleep, I'd get to the bottom of this. Well, I was up at the crack of dawn for an early morning pee, and then headed back to bed. At 10 o'clock, I was hidden in the bushes opposite the Bombay Bong with a pair of binoculars and a flask of tea. All was quiet until 11 o'clock, when Gracie Moore arrived on the scene. She rang the doorbell. There was some movement in the flat above the restaurant. Then Jeremy Khan appeared and let Gracie inside the restaurant. She began setting tables, and a little later Jeremy Khan turned the closed sign to open. Nothing too strange there. For the next few hours, a trickle of customers entered the restaurant, all exiting with brown takeaway bags in their hands, including, may I add, Mrs. Bamborough, the retired junior school teacher who had an unusual spring in her step for a lady of 88. At 2 o'clock, Jeremy Khan turned the open sign back to closed. I decided to give it another 20 minutes, and it was a good job too, because a white Peugeot 504 pulled up outside the restaurant. It was more rust than paint and had more dents in it than a Champion Conquer. The car doors opened and, blow me, out popped Stapler and Tippler. This was not the typical vehicle for a couple of drug dealers, but maybe they were keeping a low profile. Tippler rang the doorbell of the restaurant, and out came Gracie, holding an armful of folded up takeaway bags. The three of them got in the car and drove off. Quick smart, I found my scooter and followed them. The plumes of grey smoke billowing from the exhaust of the car made me job a lot easier. I made sure to follow at a safe distance. Carbon monoxide can kill, you know. We soon reached the deserted World War II barracks near Polshot. The barracks were pretty derelict. Well, derelict rather than pretty. Apart from the brick walls, the main things left were the no trespassing signs. Nearly every door and window had been pilfered, and most of the buildings didn't have a roof. The place had gone to pot. The home of our country's finest was now the headquarters of Wiltshire's drug lords. My next move was to find out in which of the buildings the marijuana farm was. I hid my scooter behind some trees and headed in by foot, actually by feet. Hopping on one foot is something I haven't done since playing hopscotch at Castle Primary School. I turned the corner to see that the white car I had been following was parked outside one of them roofless buildings. I snuck up as close as I dares and starts listening. I put my trained ear against the corrugated iron sheet that had been nailed to one of the window frames. I blocked my untrained ear with my finger. I heard voices. They were coming from the only hut with a door hanging off with one hinge. My grey matter started to think. What was my next move to be? Two's company, but three's a crowd. It was time to call for a backup in the form of DCI Frank Stigger and the SWAT team. Now, 007 is not the only one equipped with modern gadgets. I took out my Nokia 3310 only to find my plan had been scuppered. I'd forgotten I was in Polshot. Lacking in shops, lacking in pavements, lacking in law and order, and lacking even one bar of a mobile signal. Well, when plan A doesn't work, I always bypass B and head straight to plan C. C for Chuck. What would Chuck Norris do, I asked myself. Well, he certainly wouldn't get on his scooter and return to the station. I gingerly crept up to that one door, which was just ajar. I could have done with a jar of Applejack right then. Carefully avoiding the broken shards of glass at my feet, I offered myself a silent prayer, then stormed in, bellowing, "Police! Hands up! Stay where you are!" I was greeted with a scream, and a female voice shouted,
"You nearly made me wet me knickers!"
There in front of me stood Tippler, Stapler, and young Gracie, each holding up a brown paper bag. Behind them, extending way into the depths of the old barrack block, was a field of grass, but not the type of grass I had been expecting. This was the type of grass that cows eat. Nature had taken over the concrete, and scattered everywhere on this grass were plump white mushrooms, which had obviously taken a liking to the damp, wet conditions in the barracks. "Aha!" I said. "Magic mushrooms, no doubt for Mr. Khan's druggy customers. You have the right to remain silent, anything," I began. But Tippler chose not to be silent, and instead started explaining.
There's nothing magic about these mushrooms, Detective. These here are domestic mushrooms. Perfect for Mr. Khan's special mushroom barges. Uncle Mac discovered that this old army barracks is full of mushrooms. He was the one that drove us here. So me and Gracie could do the picking.
Gar, Detective Sergeant, you gave us quite a scare. Did yourself do a risk assessment before entering here?
He did at least give me the courtesy of my rank, but I still narrowed my eyes and gave Stapler a hard look. "And what were you doing here in the first place?" I said. "Up to no good, I'm guessing."
"I'm a historian. I like to study old buildings. It's amazing what you find in them,"
Stapler said with a rueful smile. Now, I had a good mind to slap him into handcuffs there and then, but with no evidence of theft, apart from a bag of mushrooms, I knew my case was light. Besides, it's hard to prosecute for breaking and entering when there's no doors or windows to break and enter through. I left the building at least with the reassurance that Mr. Khan was not peddling drugs and that the village did not have a drug problem after all. The pieces of the jigsaw had come together, although I still didn't much like the picture it was painting. Case closed. With a sour taste in my mouth, I mounted my scooter and headed back to the Horse and Whippet for some soothing medicine, a pint of Applejack. On entering the bar, you wouldn't guess who was the first person I saw. Yes, it was a grinning Jeremy Khan, who rushed over with a package the size of a shoebox under his arm.
Ah, Mr. Nobby, just the person I wanted. Come and have a drink on me for solving the mystery of my missing driver.
What was he talking about? I thought McGuinness was the Mac and the driver. I sat down next to him. The case might have been closed, but there was still a pair of dirty socks sticking out of it.
A pint of Applejack for Mr. Nobby. Your interrogation of Post Lady Mary did the trick. This afternoon, she came to the Bombay Bank to tell me that Gracie had signed for it. Now, Gracie may have a pretty face, but since she's taken a shine to young Tippler, her brains have been bowling me wide. Instead of taking the package to the restaurant, she delivered me a googly by bringing it here to the Horse and Whippet.
He took the box from under his arm.
And here it is, Mr. Nobby, my new driver.
All's well that ends well, Mr. Khan, I said. Complicated cases often have simple explanations. All it takes is deductive powers and common sense. I look forward to seeing you on the golf course, Jeremy. He gave me the look of someone who would be nervous on the first tee. As I sipped my Applejack, one thing still puzzled me though. How could a driver fit in such a small box? I was about to ask Mr. Khan when suddenly the answer struck me. It was old Whistling Walter Redwood, who was poking me in the back with his telescopic walking stick.
You're sitting in my seat, detective,
he croaked. As I stood up, the answer flashed into my brain. Jeremy had bought one of them new fangled modern telescopic drivers. Makes sense.
If you want to know the time, ask a policeman. The proper rhythmic time, ask a policeman. Every copper on the beat, yeah, he's got rhythm in his feet. 1 step, 2 step, 3 step, 4 step, ragtime, just time, swing, we're always on the beat. The lads in blue are always on the beat. We raise our buttons and we raise our voices in song. To keep us cheery when we're swinging along, we're always smart and neat. To see us passing gives the girls a treat. They all start waving and they wink a friendly eye. Hear them whisper, ain't he sweet? We can sweep them off the feet because we're on the beat.